On page 16 in the notes, we're going to take a look at one final completing the square problem. I'm going to try to solve the equation ax squared plus bx plus c by completing the square. First thing I need to do, I need to get the constant on the other side. So I'm going to subtract c, and we're going to get ax squared plus bx equals negative c. What am I going to have to do next? Well, you're not allowed to have a number before the x squared, so I'm going to go and divide everything by a. I'm going to divide the left side by a and divide the right side by a. I guess I should probably go separate my fraction here. I'm going to say ax squared divided by a plus bx divided by a equals negative c over a. And really, this first part is just x squared. I can say my next part is b over a times x, and this equals negative c over a. The next thing we have to do is add our half the middle term squared to both sides. Okay, so I need to go do half of b over a squared. What's that going to give you? Well, let me see here. This is b over 2a, which I'm squaring. Square the top, you get b squared. Square the bottom, you get 2 squared and a squared, so 4a squared. I'm going to go and add b squared over 4a squared to both sides. Then I need to factor. Well, what's that left side going to get factored into? I'm going to use my shortcut rule of just x and half the middle term before I do any squaring, so x plus b over 2a in parentheses squared. Now, as for the other side, just for fun, I'm going to switch the order. I'm going to do b squared over 4a squared minus c over a. And what I need to do is I need to get a common denominator so I can subtract these things. My common denominator is going to end up being 4a squared. Don't worry too much about where I got that from. We will talk about how to do fractions like this later on in the year. But to make that happen, I'm going to have to multiply that second fraction by 4a over 4a. This gives me x plus b over 2a squared equals b squared over 4a squared minus 4ac over 4a squared. I now have a common denominator, so I can go and subtract those. X plus b over 2a squared equals b squared minus 4ac over 4a squared. What's the next thing I have to do? I have to get rid of my square by doing the plus or minus square root of both sides. X plus b over 2a equals plus or minus. Well, remember to do this, we can do the square root of the top over the square root of the bottom. Square root of b squared minus 4ac over 4a squared. Okay, well, the top I can't really do anything with, but what is the square root of that denominator? Square root of the denominator, I think, is just 2a. So plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. I'm going to subtract b over 2a from both sides. Minus b over 2a minus b over 2a. And we're going to get x equals negative b over 2a plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. And since they have a common denominator, I can put them together and say negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Well, that should look familiar. That's just our quadratic formula. But this is where it comes from. It really comes from just completing the square with some variables in there for a, b, and c.